The Last Dance is a docu-series on Netflix about Michael Jordan, all of his teammates, most of his teammates, and his coach and the management during his time with the Chicago Bulls. So first off, you have to know that if you're not a fan of sports, you're probably not going to enjoy this series. But even if you're not a fan of sports and you just want to watch it, you'll learn a lot of stuff about the NBA and just Michael Jordan in general. If you're just, if you have any sort of interest in him as a player or basketball, you don't have to be a fan of basketball to enjoy this series. So the first episode is basically about Michael Jordan in his college years. We get to see his humble origins, his relationship with his family, him being in college and trying to up his game, the different mentors and coaches that he worked with while trying to get to the next level of the NBA. And then the second episode is mostly about Scottie Pippen. We get a little bit of his backstory. And then the third episode is Dennis Rodman's backstory, a little bit. And this series jumps back and forth between different time periods. So the beginning of the series kind of explores the origins of all the different teammates of the Bulls, but it also skips forward to the 1997-1998 season, The Last Dance is what it's called, and the final game that they'd have before they got disbanded, and also explores their rise to becoming part of the Chicago Bulls, becoming like a powerful team, learning the different things, building up different people and sort of new techniques, new coaches, and winning their first championship, and like the road to success for the first 3 wins, and then Michael Jordan's gap, and then the next 3 wins. So after episode 3, 4 to 10 basically explore the first team game against the Pistons, and then of course all of the different hardships that they go through throughout the year. Something that's really interesting about the series is that it has a lot of archive footage. They had like people with camcorders all throughout the different, like on the plane, on the bus, in the locker room, in hotel rooms. So you get that sort of intimate look. There's enough footage. It's not just interviews. Sometimes if you watch a documentary, movie, or show and there's not enough archive footage and it's just people talking, it gets kind of boring. This series isn't like that. You get to see him when he's young. You get to see all the photos. You get to see all the gory details of sorts. And it's a very interesting look at what made him Michael Jordan, what made him such a unique person. He's a very competitive person in general, but he had a lot of drive. It wasn't just talent. He had so much drive. He's the type of person that would lose and then spend an entire year putting on muscle and practicing with his team and getting good enough to stomp the other team the following year. Like, who does that? Like, he's like the real life equivalent of Goku. And you get to see like the physicality, because this is made with ESPN, so you get all that sports footage from back in the 90s. So you get to see basically all the highlights of how crazy he was at doing slam dunks, and we also get to other aspects of him as a person, not just him on the court, but him off the court, like all of his dealings with Nike, his gambling thing, his personal tragedies. Other sports teams also have their tragedies as well, and they explore some weird aspects too, like the media scrutiny and his incredible work ethic while doing the movie Space Jam, as well as the food poisoning thing that supposedly happened, which is just crazy. And overall, it's a really interesting series. It's pretty long. It's 10 episodes, so if you're not invested, then you won't make it. But overall, you learn a few things, and you get to see the contrast between the NBA in the 90s and now, and how different it is. Back then it was a much more of a physical game, and there was no social media, so if there's a lot more fandom when going to the games and trying to get something signed, or trying to get a wristband or some sort of memento instead of selfies and photos now. So it's an interesting sort of time vault capsule into what NBA was like back in the day, exploring the Bulls, exploring all the management. There's a lot of people behind the scenes that are major players that you get to find out about. And there's also some fun, parts where they're interviewing people now and showing them footage from other people that, they had beef with back in the day, and seeing their reaction now is an interesting thing, because you're never going to get them in the same room. But it's great to see a lot of different interviews with a lot of different people, not just people on the Bulls team, but you also get interviews with sports people, like the sportscasters, the coaches, the management, people on other teams, other coaches, things like that, family members. All sorts of different, perspectives are spread throughout this series. So, it's nothing like groundbreaking or shocking. If you're like a diehard Michael Jordan fan, you might get a few more nuggets of information that you didn't know about. But overall, it's a really informative series, and it's worth checking out.